Hear the word of the Lord from St. Mark, the 14th chapter. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." And he came and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came a third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour is come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Jesus actually uses that whole "with God all things are possible" verse the right way. We are so tempted to make this about ourselves, especially when we're afraid. With God, all things are possible. That means if you pray hard enough, you can't catch the coronavirus, so obviously you should be reckless. That means that if you are in a nation where there are outbreaks everywhere, it's just because of faithlessness. That means that if we really put our mind to it and everybody really gets together and prays enough, the whole thing will go away. And we make the whole thing about ourselves and our idolatry. Our Lord, in the Garden of Gethsemane, before he is crucified, prays, "Father, all things are possible for you, but not what I will, what you will." Because all things are possible for the Father. All things. Even though the disciples couldn't even remain awake, yet with God all things are possible. Even though that weekend all manner of sin, and despair, and wretchedness, and death, and sin would happen, all things are possible for God. He uses this to redeem the disciples who fell asleep. He uses this to redeem all the world who would spit on him and mock him. He uses this to redeem you and me. The Bible is about Jesus, not you. In the middle of all the panic and scary stuff and awfulness, with God all things are still possible. That means that God will even forgive us for our idolatry. Because I'm more than willing to say God's allowed to stamp his name on this thing as long as he still gives me what I want. But even here, our Lord is at work for our good. Rejoice and recognize that even when things aren't going the way that you want them to go, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, God is still at work to accomplish his will. For he who is delivered into the hands of sinful men was crucified for the sins of all the world, and he's risen from the dead. Recognize that when God says all things are possible, that's for his will to be done. That means if you're not getting your way right now, you're allowed to not like it. You're allowed to disagree with it. But it won't stop God from working. So take a big, deep breath and recognize that God has already worked your salvation. God has already worked a victory over death. God has promised to work all things for his good, and since all things are possible for him to do, even rising from the dead, nothing going on right now is something that you need to be worried about. Be at peace.